speaking. We're going to have a nice day today. As you see, we have some cookies and cake over here. We also have something special for the people that are out, both at the community house and over here. We have a special postmark which a little girl from the town designed, and we had made up in Washington, D.C. We also have cookies and cake. Peter Jennings will be our MC. We're also going to have a lot of elected officials, among them Congressman George Huckbuckner. We're going to have John Bean and many others. And there's going to be a lot of proclamations and some presents and awards given out by me. Part of this job, which I do love, is I do get to meet a lot of the people in the community, like this gentleman here. Now I'd like to introduce you to the Reverend Ursula Scheike. She's the minister of the Incarnation Lutheran Church.
Let us pray. Gracious Lord, you have richly blessed our community in so many ways. You have provided the beauty of the sea, ponds, and lakes and land for our recreational use, and the fruits of the fields and orchards for our use as well. You have given us a good place in which to work and play and live. We so often take these gifts for granted until we are reminded by an event of how truly gracious you are. Today marks such an occasion, and today we celebrate with joy and a bit of hoopla the 200th anniversary of Bridgehampton's Post Office, a real milestone for the post office and for our community. We ask for your presence at this joyous occasion and in all that we do. Grant that this may be just one of many more such celebrations for our town. We ask that you be with us as we joyously acknowledge and celebrate the dedicated service of the men and women of our post office. With your presence enliven our celebration with joy and gratitude for all that you have given us. Amen.
And now, folks, I'm going to hand the rest of the ceremony over to Mr. Peter Jennings. He's our Master of Ceremonies.
You've all been by the post office this morning on your way here, job as always. And if you think about Chris as an editor-in-chief, how much better he would make our lives. No, I'm not sure he needs this one. This looks interesting. Yes, we'll certainly give him this one. A bill, that can wait till next month. No, he didn't. So will you convey that to Chris when you get back? It is also true, I think, that the post office and journalists and politicians all have something in common. Everyone criticizes us, but they all use our service. So on that note, let me briefly introduce some local political leaders who are here today. Suffolk County Executive Robert Gaffney wanted to be here, could not be, so he has sent his representative, Bill Jones. Bill?
Good morning, everybody. Although I was born and raised in Sag Harbor and now live over in Southampton, I have had dealings with the Bridgehampton Post Office, having run for political office in the past. And one of the things that we do is we bundle all kinds of things in mail sacks, normally about 20 or 30 or 40 of them, and to send them out to you all to try and convince you to cast your ballot for us. And I can tell you that in most cases, post offices do not like that, and it's a lot of work, and they see us coming and they want to run. But the exception Bridgehampton Post Office, under the leadership of Lou Alfano. Lou, you did a terrific job, always with a smile on his face. You all probably know that. He does that on a daily basis, and I want to thank you for your help back then, and I understand why the community group got together and said this was an occasion worth marking. The other reflection that I have about the post office is the fact that what it brings to a community are two things. It brings continuity and it brings a sense of community. And I relate that back to my military days, because there is nothing so important to the morale of troops out in the field than to ensure that they get their mail on time. And I'm sure that if you've seen the movies about mail call during World War II or Vietnam or whatever it happened to be, it remains the same. As much as things have changed over the years, that sense of community still exists when the mail is delivered to a military unit that's out in the field. It brings everybody together and makes sure that everybody is on that feels the same about what's going on back home. And that's what the Bridgehampton Post Office has done here in this community for the past 200 years. It's maintained that continuity and that sense of community, and for that, you and your entire staff should be applauded. I am here today on behalf of County Executive Robert Gaffney. I have a proclamation here which I'd like to present to you and to the staff for the fine job and continued success over the rest of the next century, Lou. Thank you.
State Assemblyman from the 2nd Assembly District going to make a brief remark to us. I told John Bain as I was sitting beside him that politicians who talk too long today are in trouble at the next election.
We certainly are in trouble on your show, Peter. I know that. Well, good morning. It's a pleasure for me to be here. To congratulate Lou as a fellow Vietnam veteran, and as the parade was starting, someone came over and said, this parade is going to be just like the post office, a day late and $1 short. But it wasn't, I don't know who that was, but I'm sure they don't live in Bridgehampton. I too have a proclamation to express our appreciation for Lou and his staff, but as Bill had said, if you think we're much maligned, the post office charges too much and the services is too little, and the only things you get on time are the receipts that you didn't want. The things that you're waiting for seems to always take an extra day. Well, as Bill had said, and Lou and I had served in Vietnam, and the monthly mail call was a very important time. So if you think your mail is tardy back here in Bridgehampton or in the United States, you have to try it in a combat zone sometimes. It's a little more difficult. But the things that we receive from home, and Bridgehampton is part of that community. As we stand here today, some 20,000 troops, new troops, have gone overseas to Haiti. So if you know one, send them a letter and let them know you're there. We are gathered here today to recognize the important role the Bridgehampton Post Office has played historically for the community of Bridgehampton throughout the past 200 years, and which it continues today. We are also here to pay tribute to the dedication and service of the Bridgehampton Post Office employees, whom without the Post Office does not make a complete team, who as a group throughout the years have exemplified the words of William Mitchell Kendall, that neither snow nor rain nor heat nor gloom of night stay the couriers from the swift completion of their appointed round. Therefore be resolved that the people of the state of New York and the 2nd Assembly District commemorate the service, dedication, and significant contribution of the Bridgehampton Post Office and its employees while delivering a postal service to both local and worldwide levels of residents of Bridgehampton and its surrounding area. We hereby salute you and commend you on your 200th birthday. Lucy.
Speaking to my leader here, forgive me. I think we all know our town supervisor, Fred Thiel. Fred?
Thank you very much, and it certainly is my pleasure to be here today. And that idea about having an editor for the mail, I think that has a lot of merit. If you got my mail, you would think so too. When you look at the town of Southampton and the community of Bridgehampton, of course, an area rich in history, I think we take it for granted sometime. The rich historical heritage that we have, a town that's over 350 years old. Of course, today we're celebrating the 200th anniversary of the post office here in Bridgehampton. And the post office is important. Of course, it provides a service and function to all of us, but it is also a center of the community, as was stated before. In fact, this is a dreaded month for getting your mail, the month of October. Every politician in the world stands in front of the post office in the month of October to hand out their literature. But it's also the place where civic groups will go to get a name on a petition. In fact, there's a whole group of people that think that sometimes you have to sign your name just to get your mail. And but that's really what the post office has been. It's where people meet people and see their neighbors and see the community. And its importance in Bridgehampton is far beyond the simple service of providing the mail, which is done so well in Bridgehampton. It's my pleasure on behalf of the town of Southampton to congratulate Lou Alfano and the Bridgehampton Post Office today and all of the people that work for the post office. I have a proclamation here that states the history of the post office going back until 1794, and of course that was at the Bull's Head Inn, and now in its present location where it's been since 1962. It's a long and rich heritage and rich tradition. On behalf of the town board and the people of the town of Southampton, it's my pleasure to present this proclamation to you, Lou. It has been signed and approved by all the members of the town board. That's something that seems like maybe it hasn't happened that much in the last 200 years, but let me tell you that that in itself is an achievement, and good luck, and
Thank you very much.
best wishes in the future.
It's true. Anything signed unanimously by this board, keep it. George Gouldy is not with us today, so what I'd like you to do now is just to introduce some of the members of the Bridgehampton Customer Advisory Council and ask them to stand up so we can pay our brief respects to them. They're the ones who give Lou advice on how the system runs, and we all know that Lou needs advice. Nonetheless, he is the chairman. So can I just ask to stand up and be recognized, the Reverend Henry Faison, who's the pastor at the Bridgehampton Baptist Church, overseer of this fabulous choir, among other things. John Edwards, who runs one of the great institutions in the Bridgehampton School, goes all the way from kindergarten to grade 13. They're talking now about offering master's degrees. Anybody who loves horses, very likely to see Richard Stone Reeves portraits around. You stand up and be recognized. Joan Barker, who's the operation manager for Pulver Gas. It's getting colder, don't fool with her. And Christine Brown, who is retired from the phone company, and you look around town, you know people retired keep working almost as hard as they do. Where's Christine? Time for a little history. Nobody around here who knows the history of this area better than Robert Keene. He is the Southampton town historian. He was just a little boy 200 years ago. But fortunately, he has a great memory. Robert Keene.
Thank you very much. I was asked several weeks ago to say a few things about three things. One is about the mail. Now, you know about the mail today. Everybody's mentioned it since they've been up here. But I have a little information about the mail before that. The first organized postal service in America was created by the British Parliament, believe it or not, in 1711. But as early as 1639, there was a post office in Boston, Massachusetts. That's 1 year before Southampton was settled. Postal service between New York and Boston was established in 1672, and believe it or not, that's why we call that the Boston Post Road, or we used to. I don't know what the new generation does, but the road from Boston to New York was always called the Post Road, and that's why. The first stage route, and I mention stage because they carried the mail, was established in 1772 by three men from Sag Harbor, Samuel Nichols, Benjamin Havens, and Nathan Fordham. And they arranged most everything else in Sag Harbor at that time, from whaling ships to the bridge to North Haven, and was operated between Sag Harbor and Brooklyn. The trip took 3 days and cost per passenger $2.25. Now that's a lot of money in those days. While the goods were 1 penny per 100 pounds per mile. Figure that one out. The post office in Bridgehampton, and my date, I'm sorry, disagrees with all of the professionals, but I got this from good source, on April 1st, 95, but I'll go and say it was 94. But Sagaponack did not open until April 23rd, 1878, the same year that Westhampton Beach, by the way, was established. Although, actually, the post road had been established a few years earlier, as I said, in 1765, with the riders going on horseback before the stage. The circuit was 239 miles, and the route between New York, Brooklyn, Jamaica, Smithtown, Riverhead, Southhold, Shelter Island, Hog Neck, which is North Haven, and Sag Harbor, East Hampton, Bridgehampton, and Southampton, and back to New York on the South Shore. That circuit was continued until the American Revolution, and as late as 1812, there was still a stage route from Sag Harbor to Brooklyn, and the trip took 4 days. Now, that's my contribution to the post office. I don't mean to be controversial because I didn't write it. I just copied it. Now, I was also asked to say a few words about the name Bull or Bull's Head. Actually, it's plural. It's Bull's Head, not plural possessive, but it isn't Bullhead. And what is now Bridgehampton got its name, most of you or you older people know, because of the bridge on Bridge Lane. There's a reason for that. There was no Bridgehampton as you and I think of it today, where we're standing and sitting here. It was the road called the King's Highway, and that's about all it was. There was no Sag Harbor Turnpike. There was no Ocean Road. There were little paths and little trails, but that was about all. Now, at that time, the major population of what we now consider Bridgehampton was in Mecox and Sagaponack, long before they settled in what we call Bridgehampton. And that road, which we now call Bridge Lane, was blocked by the water of the little stream, Sag Pond and so forth, and they built that bridge very early. Now, to prove that point, the first church, of course, which was the Presbyterian or the Puritan church, the first church was built right there on the Mecox side of the bridge. And you want to go there, you can see there's a monument. Now, the church was always built in early America, the colonial days, where the people lived, naturally. Now, it was a little slow getting up to where we are now. The second church, a long time later, was built on Sag Road, directly across from where the golf course is today, and if you will look there, you'll see another house, and there is a monument in front of that saying the second church. And it was in the 1840s before the third and Presbyterian church, the new one, was built, and that means that the population slowly moved this way. Now, that takes care of that, but I'd like to mention Bull's Head. When I came to Southampton nearly 50 years ago, and I've lived in Bridgehampton for 35 years, Bull's Head, or Bullhead, was a very common expression for the community. It's less and less so today. But if you notice, the present post office has a sign, Bullhead. Now, I'd like to explain that Bullhead, or Bull's Head, got its name from a tavern. We know it as Bullhead Tavern or Wick's Tavern, and we don't know who the owner was, but that tavern was built where that beverage supply is today, on the corner of Lumber Lane, the Turnpike, and Montauk Highway. There was a house there where the tavern had been, the same building, but it had been revised and modernized and wasn't torn down until 1946. Believe me, if I'd been here, I don't think it would have been torn down. We'd have raised the devil about that one. But why was it called Bull's Head? In England, long before that, where beer has always been popular, there was a special serving of beer known as a Bull's Head. Just that simple. But since that tavern was there, and that was all that was there, before the 1700s, that little district that little intersection there now, has originally got the name Bull's Head first, and it spread naturally as Bridgehampton grew. They were saying, "No, this is still Bull's Head. This is still Bull's Head." Now, I would just like to mention one more thing, that became Wick's Tavern. You've all heard of Wick's Tavern. I won't go into that story. It has nothing to do with the post office. But Mr. Wick, John Wick, bought that building in 1695, and it was already called Bull's Head Tavern. And that is the rest of that story, but the last of it, the postmaster asked me to say a few words about this gorgeous flag right over my head. That belongs to the town of Southampton, and it is the Hulbert flag. I think most of you have heard of the Hulbert flag, and there's a big controversy, like everything about Southampton, believe me, is a controversy. Everybody in America hates Southampton because they're jealous of it. And I mean Southampton, Bridgehampton, Hayground, Watermill, so forth. They fight over everything. But that is a reproduction that the town of Southampton had made several years ago. John Hulbert was a resident, and this may surprise some of you local people, directly across from what I described, where that beverage place is, the old Rose House, which has been erroneously called Bull's Head. John Hulbert, before that house was built in the 1840s, lived there. He received a message from Washington, George Washington, in 1775 to form a militia in Bridgehampton. And he formed the militia where that second church was, where I mentioned, down by the golf course, on a Sunday, including young men from East Hampton, Sag Harbor, Southampton, and Bridgehampton. And where do you think they learned to march and fire their guns and so forth? The Triangular Commons, where the monument is today. That's what made that particular place famous. And a very short time later, he received orders to go to Fort Ticonderoga, or that area, to meet a regiment. He was a company. It was known as the Bridgehampton Company, or the Hulbert Company. And John Hulbert went up there, and he was too late to get, they marched up. And they were too late to get in the battle at Fort Ticonderoga, which was a major win for the early years of the colonies. But his company was honored by being asked to escort the prisoners, who were officers, to Philadelphia to turn them over to the Continental Congress. And when they arrived, a week or so later, they noticed this flag was being carried in the front of the troops. And it was John Hulbert's company, and it had 13 stars in a field of blue. Now the stars and the stripes, the white and the red, were used much before that, but they always had crosses or symbols of Great Britain, and not in a field of blue. You notice that this star has 6 stars, 13 stars with 6 points, and we don't know why that happened. But we do know this, regardless of our critics. And we have a lot of those critics in the museum, in Suffolk County Museum in Riverhead, where that flag is, by the way. When the flag appeared, you can imagine those congressmen and so forth sitting in the Continental Congress wondering what that was and how beautiful it must have been to them, particularly with the British prisoners. And a fellow named Francis Hopkinson, a signer of the Declaration of Independence from New Jersey, was a member of the Congress, and he sketched it. Now, they've all made jokes about this over the years. 2 years ago, in some archives in the Library of Congress, they found a bill and a receipted statement that the Continental Congress had paid Francis Hopkinson for making that sketch and turning it over to the Continental Congress. It was that sketch that they gave to a seamstress named Betsy Ross, a seamstress, who never once in her lifetime said she created the flag. She copied the flag. But we have to fight an organization known as the Betsy Ross Association. Historians have to fight all kinds of organizations, believe me. But there is no question. And one day in 1925, in John C. Gardner's house, right here in Bridgehampton, they were cleaning out the attic. And they found John Hulbert's sword, his personal papers, and it was all wrapped in the original John Hulbert flag. The ladies of Bridgehampton patched it, fixed it up, and sent it, and it belonged to Mr. Halsey of the Sketches of Local History. And when he got mad at Bridgehampton, which he did, he turned it over to the Suffolk County Historical Society, and they don't exhibit it anymore because our critics say that it's not true. And I must tell you one more statement. I'm probably boring to a lot of you people here. But they said they ought to carbon date it. Well, they did. And they said it's just a few years old. It isn't very old. Well, they carbon dated the part that the ladies in Bridgehampton repaired in 1925. So naturally it wasn't very old. So that flag, if you want to see it, you can go to Riverhead and see it. It's about 3/4 of this flag now. And the last statement is, in Flag Day, 200th anniversary, was in 1987. The Southampton Town Militia was invited to go to Philadelphia to celebrate Flag Day where it started, and we took one of these flags with us. When the ceremony was over, we went to a fort as the guest of the head of the ceremony. We parked the bus right in front of the Independence Hall. We were honored tremendously. We fired our cannon 3 times, pulled down the old American flag, and hoisted this flag up. And the ceremony chairman said, "Great. We waited 209 years to get that flag back." Thank you.
As I said, a memory. By the way, now that you've heard the history, I have a news bulletin. We learned just today, and Lou, I'm grateful for this, that of all the letters mailed here nearly 200 years ago, 90% have now been delivered. Now, we would not let you, that's a great story about the flag, by the way. We must fly it more regularly here. We would not let you go through this morning without music. The First Baptist Church Choir, which a lot of us know from Gospels at 5, is here with their director, Curtis Moore. They are not going to sing, I'm told, that great gospel favorite, "O Lord, let my mail come on time." But they do have two wonderful selections. So Curtis and the choir, take it away. guys wake up over here now, please? Okay. Thank you very much. A little bit more history. When the post office we now know was commissioned in 1962, the band was here, not the same members, but it was then directed by Charles Mockler Sr. He's retired now, but on this auspicious occasion he has come back. So I want to produce today the Bridgehampton Band with David, its director, and its guest conductor, Charles Mockler Sr. Come on, Ron, let's go. We have a little of everything for you today. Post office celebrations is perhaps not the place you thought you might hear about a train. but Ron Zeal has decided to come back and join us. He's written about 20 books on locomotives. He travels around the world taking beautiful photographs of trains. He is one of these men who, when he dreams at night and thinks he sees a light at he really means a train. Now, the post office and trains, trust us, there's a connection. Briefly, Ron Zeal.
Thank you. As many of you may know, the mail once traveled mostly by railway. And the mail service on Long Island goes back to when the first trains began running to Greenport in 1844. And it's interesting to note how the coming of the railroads changed everybody's lives. And it certainly changed the life of the post office. Because as you heard before, the circuit riders took a long time to deliver the mail. Even in the 1830s, the stagecoach from Brooklyn to Greenport, the trip took 2.5 days. In 1844, the first train was scheduled to make it in 5 hours from Brooklyn to Greenport. It made it in 3.5 hours. The railroad hasn't been the same since. You can imagine how that changed the mail service. First of all, it enabled the mail to be delivered much faster, and secondly, much cheaper. In 1870, a branch line was built from Manorville to Sag Harbor, and that was known as the Sag Harbor branch appropriately. It wasn't until 1881 that the gap between Patchogue and Eastport was closed by what is now the Montauk branch. Finally, in 1895, the railroad was extended from Bridgehampton to Montauk, making the Sag Harbor branch secondary, and it was abandoned in 1939. Now, the way the railway post office is operated, and by the way, those mail cars were called railway post offices. They actually were post offices on wheels, and they had mail slots in them. And in the back on this table, I have displayed here from my collection a number of photos of mail cars inside and out of steam trains pulling the mail cars on Long Island. And I've also got a complete set of canceled envelopes and postcards from all the mail routes on the Long Island Railroad. And you can see it says like New York and Montauk RPO. RPO means Railway Post Office. And I have around the country in the 1960s, I used to mail letters in these post office cars. Well, I also have my books back there. 6 of my 16 books have been about the Long Island Railroad, and I have other documents referring to the railway mail service on Long Island. And you're welcome to look at that stuff, especially read the little cards I laboriously typed up explaining each photograph and giving you a little bit of information. Now, it was interesting, there used to be a big express service on Long Island too. Well, on January 1st, 1913, the post office killed much of the express service on Long Island, which you may not know, but it wasn't until that date that the post office began hauling stuff besides letters and postcards. That's when they began the parcel service. And that took a lot of the express business away, but of course the parcels still traveled via the Long Island Railroad. I would like to say that the mail service was better when the railroads hauled it. They would hang the bag on a crane, and some of the photos there show the mail bags hung on the cranes. And the train would come by, slow down to maybe 50 or 60 miles an hour. A hook would suddenly appear on the side of the mail car, and whack! They would seize the mail bag, and on the station platform, they would throw out a sack of mail for the local post office. Well, they had clerks, and one of the photos shows the clerks sorting the mail in one of the Long Island post office cars. They would immediately open the mail bag. They could snag the mail at Bridgehampton, open the bag, sort it, and 10 minutes later, when the train went through got to Southampton, they threw the mail bag off, and it was taken to the Southampton post office, so you could mail a letter in Bridgehampton, and an hour later it was in the box in the Southampton post office. And that was in the 1870s. So, need we say more? Now, the mail services ended on the Long Island Railroad June 18th, 1965. And I remember 1 o'clock a.m. that morning, I was in one of the mail cars at Richmond Hill taking photographs. They let me in. It was pretty interesting because most of these postal clerks in the RPO, they were about, these guys were in the 60s, or about a half a dozen of them, and they were sorting that mail. They had a pigeonhole for every post office along the route. If it was the Montauk branch, it was every post office between Babylon and Montauk. And the way they sorted that mail, it was amazing how quick they were. And I remember setting up my camera tripod, straddling 2 boxes of live chicks that were going to Speonk. And these RPOs were cramped, as you'll see by some of the interior photos, but they were efficient. And so the service ended in 1965. I remember Mrs. Terwilliger still hanging the mailbag at the Shinnecock Hills Post Office. I have photos of her doing that. Unfortunately, I can't find the negatives. I have them somewhere. So this service ended pretty well around the country by the early 70s. Now it all goes by highway or by air, and it just doesn't make sense because the railway mail service, just like the old Pullman service and the dining cars, was so well developed and so efficient, and we just threw it all away. And the same here on Long Island. They should bring back the railway mail service because nothing was efficient or as reliable, because even during blizzards, when the airplanes are grounded and the highways are blocked, the railroads usually still get through. That's why the mail service was so efficient in the years between, for about 121 years, the railroad hauled the mail from 1844 to 1965. If I had my way, the railroad would go back to hauling the mail. So after the ceremony's over, please come back to the table. I'll be happy to answer questions, and please look over the stuff I put on display there. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Yeah, I'm a little surprised to hear people criticizing government all the time because, sometimes government is really thinking of us. I found this the other day in the 1969 instructions. Tony, help me, would you? I think Ron has been so projecting. It's great to have a speaker like that, really. The government in 1969, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, issued an executive order which I thought we couldn't live without. It says, following a nuclear attack on the United States, the U.S. Postal Service plans to distribute change of address cards. And they wonder why we're disenchanted with government at the moment. Now our next guest, before we go on, I want to introduce, just very briefly, he was late for legitimate reasons and he has blessed us by deciding he's not going to speak, but he's brought a proclamation which will be available. So can I just introduce our Suffolk County Legislator, George Gooley. George, stand up. We're also going to hear now briefly from someone who I think probably has one of the toughest jobs in town because she has to keep everybody satisfied, the town librarian, Georgiana Motter. Georgiana?
It's a lovely town and it's easy to keep everyone satisfied. But on behalf of the trustees of the Hampton Library and Harrison Gallery, I'd like to present the post office with this selection of early Bridgehampton covers.
Hold that way.
Yes. In appreciation for your services.
By the way, I did take the opportunity to see these stamps beforehand, and they do go back to 1890 to 1894, just about 100 years ago. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
While I'm up here, I would just like to acknowledge one fellow who is here. His name is Tom Hartos. He's from the Postal Clerk Union, and he was very nice of me to come down here and hello.
Now, as we get to the end of this historic morning, and Lou has received he would like to give. So, Lou, come on back up and do your bit.
I have a few awards which I like to give out. We do have a postmark which was designed by a girl
from school. And I would also like to bring up Dick Reeves here for a moment. Dick, he judged the contest, and the girl who won this was Kendra Staunchfield. Kendra? As was mentioned before, we have a CAC organization here. In fact, they were very instrumental in putting this all together. And one person here who did an awful lot of work for me was Christine Brown. She's our secretary. Christine? And about a year ago, somebody came in my office, one of my employees, and says, "Hey, Lou, did you know that the 200th anniversary is coming up?" And I said, "No." And this employee has also been very good helping me with postal history in the area. In fact, about 5 years ago, we had a boy from Riverhead who was doing a project. He wanted to know about the bull's head. Well, we didn't quite give him the description that you did, Bob, but we did help him out with his project, and Eleanor was the one who helped him out with the project. And I want to give an award to Eleanor Strickland, who put this all together by telling us about the 200th anniversary. Notice all the pumpkins in the decorations? Notice the flowers at the post office that everybody's always telling me about? Well, the guy who did it was Tony Hitchcock, and I have an award for Tony. Thank you, Tony, and keep up the great work.
I'm going to ask Henry Faison to come and close this off with the benediction. Reverend Faison?
Let us stand. Now unto him who's able to keep us from falling and will present us faultless before the presence of his glory with exceeding joy, to the only wise God our Savior, be dominion, glory, majesty, and power, both now and forevermore. Through Jesus Christ our Lord we pray. Amen.
I just want to read you about 5 lines from a poem to wrap this up, which a friend of mine found the other day, and I thought it might be nice just to wrap this up. It's an Auden poem. This is the night mail crossing the border, bringing the check and the postal order, letters for the rich, letters for the poor, the shop at the corner, the girl next door, pulling up Beatock, a steady climb, the gradient's against her, but she's on time, past cotton grass and moorland border, shoveling white steam over her shoulder. We've taken care of everybody today. Letters of thanks, letters from banks, letters of joy from girl and boy, receipted bills and invitations to inspect new stock or visit relations, and applications for situations, and timid lovers' declarations, and gossip from all the nations. Thanks for coming. Have a great morning. Bye.